Hello and welcome to HCD's 2019 Emergency Solutions Grant Application Webinar. My name is Connie Malavia and I am the ESG NOFA Program Manager. I'd like to introduce to you our 2019 ESG NOFA representatives and presenters, Jeanette Shockey and Jamie Dix.
I would like to establish the ground rules for our webinar today. We will take questions in writing. Please use the chat balloon icon located at the bottom of your screen. Type your questions in this box. Please wait to type your questions until we get to the question slide at the end of each section. Please ensure you are on mute. If we are not able to answer your questions due to time constraints or we need to further research your question, we will answer them in our FAQs. The FAQs will be posted on our website very soon. Our agenda today is as follows. I'll take a moment to explain the breakdown of ESG allocations, Appendix A in the NOFA. Then we will go over the application due date and the ESG program NOFA timeline. The first part of the workshop will cover the COC recommendation package requirements for the balance of state and the non-competitive balance of state rapid rehousing allocation. The second part will cover the regional competitions, including application, threshold, and rating criteria. We will then review the budget worksheet and indirect cost worksheet. We will end the presentation discussion how to submit an FMR or rent exception request to HUD. As stated in the NOFA, all applications are due at HCD by 5 p.m. on Thursday, May 30th, 2019, and must be received either by U.S. mail or a delivery carrier that will provide you with a timestamp and receipt. Personal deliveries will not be accepted. HCD will announce award letters in September 2019. There are 3 applications within this NOFA: COC recommendation package, non-competitive application, and the competitive application. As a reminder, always read and refer to the 2019 ESG Balance of State NOFA for guidance as you complete your applications. It's also a good idea to have your federal ESG regulations and state ESG regulations handy for reference as you go through the process. All these documents can be found at our website. Are there any questions on what we just covered? Please use the chat balloon below to type your questions now.
That might have been just as soon as we logged in.
1:31 p.m.
Can the person that said they can't hear us reply that they can hear us now? What is the time period for this funding?
Could you clarify as far as what you mean by time period?
How long are the contracts for? Okay, the contracts are up to 24 months, but as you know, the clock starts ticking when we get the HUD letter. So depending on when we get the HUD letter and you get an executed contract, it takes away from the 24 months. So most likely it's going to be 15 months, 18 months. Any other questions? Okay, we'll get started on the next section then. Oh, there's one more here. If we just receive funding, are we eligible to apply again? Yes, you are. You're eligible to apply again. If you're at balance of state, you go ahead and do your request for proposal to your applicants and select the applicants that are going to apply for funding with us. Okay, are we finished? I'll wait a couple minutes. Okay, let's move on to the next section. We're going to talk about the COC recommendation package for the balance of state. The COCs are responsible for completing and submitting the COC recommendation package. The continuum of care plays a significant role in how and where these ESG funds will be directed within their community or service area. A COC typically issues a request for proposal for qualified eligible applicants. An eligible applicant can be a nonprofit or a unit of local government. The COC is responsible for recommending provider applicants for both the non-competitive rapid rehousing funding and the regional competition, and we'll talk about that later in our presentation, the non-competitive and regional competition. There are 5 forms in the recommendation package that the COC is responsible for completing and submitting. As you can see, Form 1 is the COC compliance certification, Form 2 is the COC contact information, Form 3 is the process letter, Form 4 is the funded applicants, and Form 5 is the unfunded applicants. Now, if you're following along in the recommendation package, you can turn to page 4, to Form 1. By signing this form, the COC authorized representative certifies the COC has followed an application selection process that is fair and open and avoids conflict of interest when rating, ranking, and selecting those applicants that will participate in both the non-competitive and regional competition. So we encourage all of the COCs to stay reasonably consistent with the department's selection criteria, and we'll discuss further about this in Form 3. By signing Form 1, you certify you understand and will comply with the core practices. So you can refer to your state ESG regs, section 8409 for the core practices. Core practices must include a comprehensive and coordinated entry system for homelessness. And all ESG assisted projects must operate in a manner consistent with Housing First practices. Part of doing your due diligence as a COC, you need to ensure that you select applicants that are able to meet the match requirement. And remember, this is federal funds, so you need to match 100%. You want to make sure your selected applicants adopt the COC written standards. Providers are required to enter data into the HMIS system operated by the COC. However, if you're a domestic violence provider, you can enter your data into a comparable database, and the coordinated entry system must prioritize access to homeless services for those with the most severe needs. Now let's turn to page 2. It's pretty self-explanatory, but I just want to go over it. You need to fill in your COC name, the HMIS software and lead information, and if you're a domestic violence provider or a legal service provider, you're allowed to use a comparable database, like I said, rather than using the HMIS. Form 3, it's a letter from the COC describing how they selected their providers for both the non-competitive and competitive funding. In this section, we're looking for a selection process that's similar to HCD, make sure it's fair and open, illustrates that the selection process was advertised and technical assistance was provided to those that applied. Again, refer to your ESG regs 8404A2 and 8404A4 for guidance so that you cover everything in your letter, include everything that is in those sections. The Form 4 of the COC recommendation package is the funded applicant Excel spreadsheet. There we ask for the COC's ranking list for each application they recommended for funding for both the non-competitive and regional competition. You'll provide the applicant's name and address, project name and address, proposed subpopulation targeting with ESG if you have it, the cities and counties where the activities will be provided, and the dollar amounts recommended for funding by activity. The next form is the unfunded applicants, and you'll repeat the same process as above. However, this will be for the applicants you did not recommend for ESG funding. And to submit the recommendation package, the COC will submit an original hard copy in a 3-ring binder. It must include all the forms we just covered with original wet signatures, And it's very helpful if you tab each section in the binder. Please include a USB flash drive with a copy of the Excel version and also a PDF copy. We don't allow applications to be walked in or dropped off or emailed. You must mail your package and application to the address shown on page 22 in the NOFA. Any questions on what is needed to submit a complete COC recommendation package? Please type your questions now using the chat balloon icon below. Will we be able to access this presentation somewhere? We will post the presentation to our website along with a recorded version. Does the COC rank applicants? Yes, you put together a team of people to rate and rank and make sure there's no conflict of interest. Let's see, is there any more? Can you? We're good. Oh, okay. Okay, so I think we're good. Do we have any more questions? I'll wait a minute and see if there's anything else that needs to be answered.
We just discussed the COC's role in selecting the applicants they want to participate for both the non-competitive and competitive funding. This portion of the webinar will focus on the non-competitive rapid rehousing set-aside. Please pull out your non-competitive application to follow along. The COC may choose a minimum of 40% and a maximum of 50% of their total ESG service area allocation for the non-competitive rapid rehousing applications. To illustrate, let's look at Marin County in the Bay Area allocation region. Marin County CFC has a total ESG allocation of $185,960. They can use between 40% and 50% of this total towards their non-competitive rapid rehousing applications. Between $74,384, $92,980. We have also provided the amount left over after each COC decides what their non-competitive allocation will be. If Marin County chooses to allocate 40% of their $185,960 to the non-competitive rapid rehousing pool, then the $111,576 that is left over will go towards the entire amount left over for the Bay Area competitive applications to compete for. Let's say the COCs in your region decide to use 50% of their allocations for the non-competitive pool. The remaining 50% would be available. That's one number for the region to compete for the regional competitive pool. Under this application, the multi-county COC can recommend up to 3 applications for the non-competitive rapid rehousing set-aside, and a single COC county can recommend up to 2 applications for the non-competitive. It will be the COC that determines how much their selected providers will apply for. Again, the total amount funded must equal 40 to 50% of your COC service allocation. You can add on a street outreach and or homelessness prevention activity in addition to your rapid rehousing activity. Your add-ons can be up to 10% of your total application amount. That is 10% for homelessness prevention and 10% for street outreach. There are 2 types of subcontracting permitted under ESG. They are subcontracting for services provided to the funded program. Procuring services related to carrying out funded program is permissible. For example, hiring security, supportive services, and food services, federal procurement rules may apply. And number 2, applications that contain multiple ESG eligible activities are permitted under the annual plan, or NOFA may subcontract with separate providers for those activities. For example, Rapid Rehousing Program that requests funds for both Rapid Rehousing and HMIS may subcontract to a different entity for their HMIS. HMIS has a maximum of 10% of their total application request amount. Grant Admin has a maximum of $200 per application for the units of local government only under the federal ESG allocation. Now we'll be talking about forms within the application. The first two forms are, form number 1, the applicant will complete their contact information and COC contract information. Form number 2, this form is required because we notify your local legislative representatives of the amount of the ESG funding their district will be receiving. Form number 3 is a certificate of indirect cost and is required by all applicants in both non-competitive and regional competition. I want to bring this form to everyone's attention. Everybody submitting applications in both the non-competitive and competitive must check the appropriate boxes and sign the form. Even if you will not be claiming indirect costs, you still are required to check the appropriate box and sign Form 3, Certificate of Indirect Costs. Form number 4 is regarding the budget. The indirect cost sheet and final program budget sheets are the same for both the non-competitive and competitive applicants. We will cover the budget sheets at the end of the presentation. Form number 5 is the payee data record and TIN form. These both have links located on the HCD website. All applicants must either submit a payee data record or government agency taxpayer ID form, also known as the TIN form. All nonprofits are to complete the payee data record, and all local governments are to complete the TIN form. Form number 6 is projected outcomes. The applicant will provide a projected performance data for each ESG activity in which they are requesting funding. Note, the definition of a household. It is an individual or a family that will be served during the duration of the grant. For projects that serve single individuals, a household is the same as an individual. For families, the count is head of household, or 1. These will not be scored since this is non-competitive application. However, this information must be submitted in order to be eligible. Form number 7, the resolution. Both the non-competitive and regional competition applicants need to submit a resolution with their applications. Applicants are encouraged to use the sample authorizing resolution format to avoid any possible deficiency. A deficiency may disqualify the application as being incomplete or delay execution of the standard agreement and drawdown funds. We have provided the instructions for completing the resolution within the template. There is only one document you need to follow. As always, the resolution must be on your letterhead, and as a reminder, don't forget to remove all the instruction verbiage that is in the template. Here are some key tips to remember. Paragraph A asks for the NOFA date, so use the date the NOFA was released, March 29th, 2019. And number 2 asks for the dollar amount of the grant you are applying for. We suggest that you inflate this amount in case additional funds become available. You can always have a higher dollar amount of funds requested on your resolution, but never a lesser amount. So you may want to plan ahead and pad this amount. Now let's look at section number 4 of the resolution. This is where you identify the authorized representative by name and title. If you need to identify multiple parties as an authorized representative, then please keep in mind that all of those individuals must sign all ESG documents. Don't use and/or when naming an authorized representative. This will result in the applicant going back to the board for an amended resolution. If you identify a designee as one of your authorized representatives, you must submit a letter of designation to the department showing that the designee is authorized to sign. This may be a letter on letterhead, or HCD does have a template that is available for you to use. Please email the ESG inbox for a copy of the template. Be sure the ayes, noes, absentations, and absent boxes have numbers in them. Please do not leave them blank. At the bottom of the resolution, the approving officer must sign and print their name. The person attesting the resolution cannot be the person identified as the authorized representative. Form number 8, the last form in the application. Certification of continuum of care approval for applicant. The COC authorized representative must print and sign and date this form. This signed form tells us that the applicant was selected and approved to submit the application for the non-competitive funding. This ends the presentation on the non-competitive application. Are there any questions on what we just covered? Please use the chat balloon below and ask your questions now.
Is admin 10% de minimis, or can we use our federally cognizant rates? Yes, if you have a federal cognizant rate, you can use it. You just have to have the letter proving that you've got that approved. Otherwise, it's the 10% de minimis rate. Another question? Okay, we're going to move on, and we'll have another opportunity to ask questions later on. We're now going to cover the balance of state regional competition application threshold criteria. As you guys are aware, the competition has 3 participating regions: the Bay Area, Central and Imperial Valley, and the Northern region. All applicants must obtain a recommendation from your COC to apply, and single county COCs are responsible for recommending a maximum of 2 providers in the regional competition, and multi-county COCs are responsible for recommending a maximum of 3 providers in the regional competition. And this is new this year, having multi-counties getting to recommend 3 applications. All applications submitted to HCD must meet threshold requirements before moving forward. First, a completed application with all the required attachments must be received by May 30th, the deadline at 5 p.m. Providers should keep in mind that the COC signature requirements in mind when creating the timeline for application submittal. All applications will be scored as initially submitted. Missing documents needed only for the purpose of executing a standard agreement or monitoring a contract may be requested later by the department. All applicants seeking funding under this NOFA must either be a private nonprofit organization or a unit of general local government proposing to provide eligible activities within the COC service area as listed in the NOFA Appendix A. Again, a COC recommendation with certification is required. If we receive an application without the COC signed certification, we will not be able to rate that application. The minimum application amount is $75,000 and the maximum is $200,000. The following activities are eligible under the balance of state. Street outreach is eligible as a standalone activity or as an add-on activity. If you choose to add on street outreach, your competitive application, you're limited to a maximum of 10% of the amount requested per application. Homelessness prevention is eligible only as an add-on activity, which is 10% of the total requested per application. Homeless Management Information System cannot exceed 10% of the total requested per application. The application should include a system-wide written standards for proposed activity adopted by the COC, and consult the federal ESG regulations for what should be addressed in the written standards for each activity. Also, state regulations require that written standards reflect the core practices in Section 8409. Funded applicants must make matching contributions in the amount that's equal to the amount of the federal ESG award. Matching contributions may be obtained from any sources, including any federal, state, local, and private sources. So you could use cash money, you could use cash, in-kind donations, But for further information, see 24 CFR 576-201 for more information on the types of match. The authorizing resolution is also part of this threshold. Now, for emergency shelters, site control documentation is required, and examples of site control is a deed, an enforceable lease, or purchase agreement. See Attachment J for other site control documentation. Also, for private nonprofit organizations that are proposing emergency shelter activities, you must fill out all the certification of local approvals, Attachment C. It must be completed and signed by the city or county where the activity is located. Ensuring the completeness and accuracy of your threshold documentation is important. An application may be deemed ineligible if the application doesn't meet threshold requirements, or if the application is incomplete and we cannot determine compliance. We may request clarification of statements made in the application and other supporting documents as long as it does not impact the competitive scoring of the application. And we may also request documentation necessary for compliance with federal requirements, again, provided the documentation isn't used for scoring purposes. And also, an applicant may be asked to revise documents if necessary to establish compliance, provided the revision does not impact the competitive scoring of the application. Now we're going to move on to the rating criteria, and there are 5 rating categories, and they're worth 90 points. Applicant experience, program design, need for funds, impact and effectiveness, and cost efficiencies. We're going to review each rating category. So rating category 1 is called applicant experience. It has 2 parts. It's worth 20 points. In part 1, the applicant will tell us how many years of experience they have operating the program they're applying for. Or if the applicant has had more years operating a similar project, they would complete that portion of the application. And then you'd be asked to describe that similar activity. The second part of this rating category is labeled ESG contracts administered. And that you can have potentially deduct up to 20 points for those that have or had ESG contracts in the past 3 years. If the organization had ESG contracts with HCD and you had to disencumber funds, had the contracts terminated, unresolved monitoring findings, or relate with any annual reports, points will be deducted accordingly. So this year, our grants management team has made an effort to go out and monitor, so they'll continue to do that, and that may affect your scoring if you have unresolved monitoring findings. And I would also make sure that you get your APRs in time, that you don't have any late reports. The next one is program design, and it's worth 20 points. In making determinations under this rating factor, you must submit the following: the COC written standards, program rules, policies, and procedures, and coordinated entry policies and procedures. This year, you will be able to self-certify that you are implementing program design requirements for the activity you applied for. The COC representative named in the application must sign the self-certification form. And then beginning on page 9 of the competitive application, you will find the core practice tables. These tables are broken out into eligible activities: emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and street outreach. You only need to complete the primary activity. If you are applying for emergency shelter, that is only core practice table you'll need to complete. On page 19 of the application, we want you to tell us about your program staff that works directly with program participants. Do not include staff that may have contact with clients such as food handlers, security guards. Rather, please enter the job title, duties, and full-time equivalent for staff that provides direct client services for ESG activities. The next rating category is need for funds, and it's worth 10 points. In this rating category, the COC will complete this rating category. Need for funds is based on whether the application activity and subpopulation targeting, if any, meets a high need for the community as identified by the COC in a manner that is consistent with core practices. Need is supported by the data and analysis provided by the COC. So to complete the 3 data tables, you'll need the 2018 point in time count, housing inventory count, and if you are doing a standalone street outreach application, we need your caseload capacity. So using your 2018 point in time data, you will be entering the sheltered, and if you did complete the unsheltered amounts, please enter that. Those applying for emergency shelters and or rapid rehousing will complete Table 2 using the COC's 2018 housing inventory count. For standalone street outreach applications, use your total caseload capacity. Keep in mind, if your street outreach is only an add-on, you don't need to complete this. After the tables are completed, the COC will provide a narrative that analyzes the data provided in all the tables. And the questions you need to answer is why the proposed activity meets a high need in your community, what population your activity will serve, and if the program targets a specific subpopulation. All supporting narrative and documentations of your point in time and HIC data will need to be placed behind attachment E and F, the need for funds. The next one we're going to talk about is impact and effectiveness rating category, and it's worth 30 points. The first section is scoring for the performance outcomes in the impact and effectiveness rating factor will be evaluated using your project level data from HMIS for federal fiscal year 2017-18. Or for those projects not in operation during the entire period, use the most recent 12 months. Please be sure to submit something, even if it's less than a year or is a similar project. And of course, victim service providers or legal assistant providers may use data from the HUD compliant comparable database. You will attach your HMIS or comparable data behind attachment G. And I just want to emphasize that you need to do your project level data for this one. All right, we have provided definitions to assist you with completing A and B in the chart on page 13 of the application. Project level performance data for the proposed activity. So an individual leavers are persons who exited the project and no longer enrolled in the project as of the last day of the reporting period. Permanent housing destination, it's subsidized or unsubsidized housing situations. It also includes living with family or friends on a permanent basis. This information you provide in the chart should include all program participants from all sources of funding for your project. So column A, you enter the total number of individual leavers who exited to permanent housing, and column B, enter the total number of individual leavers who exited to any destinations, and then you will get the calculation, and we will use that on a curve. We'll take your scores and we'll assign a number based on the curve. So provide project level performance metrics will be compared against programs of the same activity type. So if you're applying for rapid rehousing, all the rapid rehousing will be rated together, all the emergency shelters will be rated together. Also, you need to provide the system level performance measures, which are reports submitted by the COC. The system level performance measures must be consistent with HUD's May 2015 System Performance Measure Guidelines. Fiscal year 2017-18 data needs to be provided for the measures 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7, and must be submitted and placed behind attachment G. Scoring will solely be based on to the degree that you can provide us the information. So as long as you give us the measures, you'll get points for that. The final rating category is cost efficiency, and it's worth 10 points. Scoring for this rating factor will be evaluated using the HMIS and expenditure data for federal fiscal year 2017-18. Applications will be evaluated based on the average cost per exit to the permanent housing. Applicants will attach their 12-month program expenditure documentation. Be sure to include all the costs associated with the requested activity, which includes HMIS, administration, and indirect costs. Note the time period used for the expenditure data and the time period for leavers exiting to permanent housing must be the same. The number of individual leavers exited to permanent housing destination will equal the chart on page 13 of the application, the project level performance data in column A. Now we're going to talk about the budget. Okay, I just want to go over some points here. In section 2, the ESG application amount, put the dollar amount you're applying for, so $200,000. And you're applying for an emergency shelter. So you're going to fill in $200,000 in the application budget, or $180,000. And then down at the subcontract, you want to exclude $5,000 costs for indirect. And then we're going to go down to the bottom and put $20,000 in for HMIS. And that can't be more than 10% of your contract. Then we go down at the bottom, and you'll see that your indirect costs, you're going to put in your approved indirect cost rate percentages. So if you don't have a federal cognitive agency that is higher, that's allowing you to do a higher rate, then you can put 10% in. So put 10%. And then that'll calculate. So $19,500 is your maximum allowable indirect cost. Now we're going to go over to attachment M of the final budget. And you're going to see the final program budget with indirect costs has been automatically populated. And because you have $19,500 in indirect costs, you get to place where you want your indirect costs. So I'm going to put it all up in emergency shelter, and I'm just going to put $19,500 in essential services. That's your indirect cost. So put $19,500 in your indirect cost. And then you're going to put your match contribution. You're going to say you're matching 100%, so a match $180,000. And then the source of match, you can put cash, whatever your source is going to be. And then we go down to the bottom, and you'll see that you've matched, and your indirect costs are in there. So that is how the form works. So you get to decide where you want your indirect costs to go, and the final program budget column is automatically calculated for you. And because there's 100% federal funded, the amounts will have to be matched dollar for dollar, and make sure you put the source of match in each one. Okay. Please use the chat balloon below to ask your questions now. Okay, so no funding available for Southern California. Los Angeles has funding, but they get funded as an administrative entity. And tomorrow we're having that webinar.
That's a separate NOFA.
It's a separate NOFA.
So there is funding for Southern California, but it's under a separate NOFA, and we're going to hold our webinar for that tomorrow.
At 10 o'clock. Okay, so if our COC only completed a shelter count in 2018, then just give us that. You don't have to give us, we know that in 2018 it's every other year, so you do not have to provide us with the 2017 unsheltered. So just give us the shelter count. We did have some agencies that went ahead and did the 2018 unsheltered count. So if you have it, you can provide 2018. If not, just the 2018 shelter will work. Why was the $5,000 excluded? In our indirect cost calculation, I'll refer you back to...
She was just using an example that under subcontracts that if you have a subcontract that is over $25,000, you cannot...
You get a maximum of $25,000.
You get a maximum of $25,000.
So if you have it for $30,000,
then you would have to exclude
$5,000
from being used toward indirect costs. So that was just an example that she put in there.
Example. Can we select multiple areas where the indirect costs go? Yes, you can put it anywhere you want. If we are a DV emergency shelter, are we compared to other DV shelters? No. You're compared with all of them, unfortunately. Question on indirect and match. If we don't list the indirect match on the essential service line, won't our match be less than 100%? Well, you would have put 20,000 in your HMIS, you would match that section too. So you have to match it line by line. It has to be matched a total of, if you ask for 200,000, you have to put 200,000. So do you want us to go back to the, we can go back to the example. Just give us a minute. Okay. So, go back up to the top. So here we can put the $20,000 match, and then you've matched down at the bottom 200,000. We've got 180 and 20, and it's 200,000 match. If you take admin, you are required to match the admin portion. So it says, are we required to match the admin portion? Remember, keep in mind, balance of state only is if you are a local government, you get $200 to match, or $200 in admin fees. The rest, nonprofits do not get any general admin. So, but yes, you are required to match. Any other questions on this section? And if there isn't any more questions, we'll move on to our last section. And keep in mind, just email your questions to the NOFA inbox, and we'll get back to you with the answer.
If you are having problems finding affordable rental units for your rapid rehousing program and homelessness prevention program that meet FMR, then you may need to apply for a rent exception to HUD. The FMR rent exception is made through HCD to HUD and is based on information provided by the subrecipient to HCD. This process takes several months, so we recommend you contact your grants management unit representative ASAP and begin the rent exception process. The letter should include the following: county's current approved Section 8 rent standard. If Section 8 rent standard is above FMR, then include the date this increase above FMR was approved, current rental vacancy rates, and the average increase in rents in your county over the past 12 months. Also, the letter should include the negative impact of lower rents, for example, low program spend-down rates, time period between program participant being granted rapid rehousing assistance and actually finding a unit, number of landlords that have refused to participate because rents offered were too low. Now let's recap. All applications are due on May 30th. COC recommendation package, non-competitive applications, and regional competition applications. The ESG NOFA staff are here to provide technical assistance through email. Please feel free to contact us for assistance at esg@hcd.ca.gov. We covered a lot of material. Are there any questions over the regional competition application? If so, please use the chat balloon below to ask your questions now. And thank you for attending the 2019 Balance of State webinar. Please complete the survey that will be emailed to you within the next few days. Now let's take a look at those last questions. Nothing?
Will we be emailing the presentation to participants? We hadn't planned to do so because we are going to post it later this week or early next week, and it will be recorded. It will be available on the website.
Next week. Okay. Where can we post? Where can we post the count? I need further clarification on this question. Where can we post the county award available amounts? Can that question be clarified? We're not following it. Imperial Valley is only eligible for the regional competition. Well, you have to go to your COC, and the COC just determines who they're recommending for the non-competitive and the competitive competition. So check with your COC and see how they're, and start how they're going to select the two that are going to be recommended for funded for the non-competitive and the two that will be recommended for the competitive. Okay, where can we find the county award amounts? I'm assuming that your question might be, look in the NOFA on Appendix A, and that will tell you which, how much each COC is getting for funding. I think that's your question, the answer to your question. The attachment MA is not auto-populating the direct cost rate calculation. Okay, wait. I am filling in the placeholder amounts on my budget form. Yes, we're aware of that problem. We fixed it. It's in the process of getting posted. Within the next couple of days, you will see a letter go out, a listserv saying that it's been corrected, or check our website. It went out today. Will this funding overlap with ESG funding just awarded? Yes. The funding that just got awarded now, we're expected to go into contract in the next 90 to 120 days. Then you'll probably get a contract for the 2019 in November. So yes, you'll have overlap. Any other questions? Unfortunately, we don't have that information at this time. The question is how much overlap in months? Because we don't have the 2018 ESG contracts executed yet. I can't tell you when our 2019 are going to be executed because it all depends on HUD and when they release our HUD award letter. This year we got it in February, and
so at this time, right now, with the 2019 ESG funding, that's the NOFA that we're talking about, we anticipate announcing awards in September. And it typically takes about another 60 to 90 days to execute contracts. So it will be at least November before you would get an executed contract. So you will receive your 2018 funds before that, but this is going to be just a few months apart from each other, more than likely.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for attending our Balance of State webinar. And again, any questions that you may have, please use our ESG inbox, and we'll respond as quickly as possible. We will start preparing our FAQs. The FAQs are derived from questions we received in this webinar and also questions that we get in through the inbox. So our goal is to get those out to you by the end of next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.